This is Gail from Rainbow Food Rocks, and I'm here with my recipe book, Rainbow Food Rocks. And in this recipe book, everything is wheat-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, corn-free, soy-free, egg-free, and peanut-free. I made everything vegan, vegetarian, and plant-based compliant. And we are going to make a pine nut pesto, pignoli pesto. You can find this on page 15 in my recipe book, and I will show you what that looks like. Here you are. So we are going to make this beautiful pesto right here. And you can find this book on Amazon and blurb.com. And the first thing I like to do anytime I'm doing a recipe is to plan ahead. So in planning ahead, I went out to my garden, which is in my backyard, and I picked some beautiful basil, and I rinsed it all off, so I'll go ahead and show you that. And then I got all my materials ready. So I looked on my ingredient list. I needed pine nuts, so I have my pine nuts ready. These ones happen to be from Trader Joe's. You can get them from elsewhere. I am going to actually skip the kale. I do not have any kale growing in my garden, and that's okay. See, the great thing about my recipes is that you can maneuver them around and massage them around to whatever you need. So if you don't have an ingredient, you can always swap something else. Sometimes you can omit certain things. In this recipe, you can omit the kale since I don't have it. And so the next thing is that we need garlic. So here is my garlic, and I purposely didn't chop this because I wanted to show you in planning ahead how you would want to cut this up, and also what you could do with the outside, because a lot of people, they just cut up their garlic and they chuck the outside and they're done with it. And the thing is that we can actually save this, and I usually have a bag full of cut ends, and we can use this to make a vegetable broth. And so most people think, oh, you have to have just like the carrots and the celery, but you can actually use the ends of things to make a really healthy and nutritious broth. So that's why I left this like this. We'll go through how I cut this and why I do what I do and how I save it. We also will need olive oil. I happen to have some Sicilia PGI organic olive oil, and I usually try to go with PGI olive oil, but get whatever you can. And then also this recipe calls for dried nettle. So I have my dried nettle here. And something I like to do is make nettle salt. And what I will do on this episode is show you how you can make nettle salt and use that in this recipe as well. Then I have my lemon. We'll be cutting this in half. And I'll go over with you too how I like to save the seeds. And we can do either sea salt or nettle salt. I have my Celtic sea salt here, but we'll also make the nettle salt so you can get a feel of what that's like. And then the nettle salt you can use as a salt for any of your recipes. So that one you'll find very useful. Nettle is really great for hair and for allergies if you have really bad seasonal allergies. And we'll also be using some black pepper. So I have some black pepper here. You can grind your own with peppercorns. I just happen to have this already ground. And then when you're going to do your recipe, you want to make sure that you plan ahead. So in my recipe book, I put a plan ahead section for most of the recipes. And then there are just a few that just really don't need it. You can just wing it. So in planning ahead, if I were to use the kale, I would be de-stemming the kale and cutting the kale. But since I don't have the kale, we're just going to leave it out. The basil, like I mentioned, I already prepared. And we're going to peel and chop the garlic. So I'm just going to move some things around so that you can see what I'm doing. So I have my garlic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it right here. And I'm a self-made chef. My story pretty much goes like this, and I'll tell you as I'm cutting. I have 3 children, and my oldest had, and I say had because she no longer has, autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. And my youngest daughter, now what I'm doing next, by the way, is I am taking my fingers and just kind of peeling it now that I've cut that one end. It's very easy to take them off. So my youngest daughter was having pain from her waist down, and she was scrunching her feet in pain, was having stomach issues, bloated, fatigued, couldn't walk. She was almost 2, and she was an early talker, so she was able to tell me what was going on. And my youngest, my son, he was somewhere between 6 and 9 months old. I can't remember now. This was back in October of 2015, so it was 5 years ago almost. And he was just starting Gerber baby foods, and he was breaking out from what apparently was a wheat allergy. Okay, so I'm going to stop my story here for a moment. So the next thing I'm going to do is, you see you have your piece of garlic here. I'm going to chop this hard piece off because I find it a really big nuisance if I'm eating something with garlic and I get that hard piece at the end. So I'm going to chop it off, but I'm not going to throw it away. I'm going to save it. And I'll show you at the end, what I'm going to do, which I already pretty much told you. So anyhow, I started trying to heal my oldest daughter first from autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. And I went and eliminated some foods. And I started with dairy. And when I eliminated dairy, my daughter, she got 25% better. And I was going to a naturopathic doctor who was overseeing everything. And I was also going to an autism center in Washington State. And they were watching everything that I was doing. And so when I saw that she was getting 25% better from just taking out dairy, I was motivated to do more research, see why, like what was going on with the dairy, that would make a difference, to learn about that, and then to go into taking out, what was it next? Wheat. Because usually dairy and wheat and gluten tend to be the ones that people think about omitting for autism spectrum disorder. Some people just call it autism, but there's a whole spectrum and different things such as Asperger's and such. So I decided to take out the wheat and anything that was with gluten, and that included like barley and rye, but I never ate barley and rye anyhow, so we just didn't even have that to worry about. It was just mostly the wheat. We decided to substitute with corn, so we were doing corn tortillas, corn chips, all these items with corn. And the corn, I was making really close observations, I happen to be very observant, turned out to be worse than the wheat. And so I was getting like corn chicken nuggets and like corn, like everything corn. And I noticed that the behaviors had gotten 25% better and the symptoms had gotten 25% better for my oldest daughter, Abigail. But the corn made it like we were back to square one, sometimes even worse. And so I decided to take out the corn. I told my naturopathic doctor what I was observing. I let the autism center know what was going on. So by that point, I was not doing dairy, wheat, or corn for my oldest daughter, Abigail, which was a huge challenge because everyone else was still eating whatever they wanted. So I was actually setting the example, and I was the only one in the family setting the example of not eating those items to go along with this experiment. So I took out those, and my daughter got 50% better. And so I started wondering, well, like, why? Why 50% better? What is it about the wheat, the dairy, and the corn? And so I started learning about the glyphosate in wheat and corn and GMO corn. And then I started learning about how the GMO corn is used to make citric acid and ascorbic acid, which most people know as vitamin C. However, there are other ways of getting vitamin C, is what I've learned. And it just put me down this rabbit hole of what's going on with our food, the chemicalization, the changing of things. I mean, even with the dairy, with the cows, and I started reading about, like, there's A1 and A2 cows, and so I'm like, what in the world is going on? So, okay, 50% better, and my youngest daughter is still in pain, having trouble walking, and so on and so forth. So I start, and I don't remember exactly when it's actually written in my book, but I start implementing this for my my son because of the breakouts on his hands, and he was getting staph infections from the potential wheat allergy, which we really do know it was actually wheat now. We didn't know at that point. So then I took out that for him. I took out the corn for him, and I didn't realize all those Gerber baby snacks had, like those puffs and everything, had corn in them. And then I started doing that with my oldest daughter, my youngest daughter, Adeline, as well. So all 3 kids were not having dairy, wheat, or corn. And my son Jeffy got better, Abigail 50% better, like I said, and Adeline, she was getting a little bit better here and there, but she was still having immense foot pain. So I started taking a step further. I started doing more research. What else could I take out? And I came across, if I took out natural flavors, artificial flavors, dyes, anything with numbers, and soy. So I took soy out, and that was a little tricky learning, all the different places that soy is hidden into things. Okay, I'm going to pause my story for a second. So the next thing I'm doing here is I'm taking my garlic, and now I remember I've chopped off those hard pieces, and I've peeled them, and I'm slicing it. Now this is going to go in my, normally I would use a food processor. I'm actually going to put this in the mini blender for today. But you can see here, I'm just slicing the garlic as I tell you this story, because I feel it's really important that as you're learning to make this pesto, you understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so I took out the soy, and like I mentioned, all those other things, and my oldest daughter, Abigail, got 75% better from autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. And the Autism Center didn't really want to acknowledge this. I took a special class with them, and they kind of poo-pooed the idea of food really making that much of a difference. They've heard anecdotally some people had success with the wheat and the dairy taking out and the gluten, but nothing to the point where it would change the diagnosis. Well, I was on my way to proving them wrong, and that you can actually change a diet and use detoxification, natural detoxification, to change a diagnosis, which led me down another rabbit hole I'll get to later. And so my oldest daughter gets 75% better, and I mean 75% better, where it's starting to get more difficult to notice what's going on. Then I was like, okay, my youngest daughter's still having all this trouble. I had taken my youngest daughter for an MRI. They thought she had spina bifida. She was scrunching her feet in pain still. We had done blood tests. They couldn't find anything wrong. She didn't have children's arthritis or anything. So I was getting pretty desperate. I went back to my naturopathic doctor, and she's a wonderful person. If you ever go to Washington State, her name is Dr. Brandy Ross, and she's also a midwife. She helped me with home birth, so I'm giving her a shout out in this video. And so she was the one that was overseeing all this food and giving me suggestions and such too of things we could try and going back and forth. So she recommended a food sensitivity test. It's called an IgG food allergy test or food sensitivity test. And it's the one where they prick your finger and they put your blood on 5 circles, and they test over 100 different foods to see if you're having any inflammation from those foods. Well, sure enough, for Adeline, the foods that I had already omitted had come up as being irritants in her system, even though they had been out of her system for a few months by then. And she showed up having eggs in the red zone, which was like high zone, like number 5. And so I thought, well, I'm going to take out eggs. And when I took out the eggs, and by the way, I'm just dicing the garlic. It turned out that the eggs were the key thing that was holding my daughter back, my daughter Adeline back, from being able to walk and not be in pain. And so and it was a process though, I mean, it wasn't immediate, but when we took out the eggs, she was walking, she was not in as much pain, and slowly she started healing enough, and then eventually the bloating went away and all of that. But it was a process. She had been eating a lot of eggs because we had taken out other things from the diet. And just so everyone knows, my kids do eat meat. Just because my book is vegetarian and vegan and plant-based doesn't mean that my kids don't eat meat. I'm actually the one that doesn't eat meat. And I have a little bit of a separate story of something that happened to me all at the same time. I'll get into that later. So my youngest daughter gets better. I have the IgG food allergy test done for my oldest daughter, Abigail, the one that had autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. And she winds up showing the same foods that had been taken out of her diet were causing inflammation, and the eggs were also a problem. So when I took out the eggs as the last part, that was pretty much my golden ticket to healing my kids. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, did you use anything else besides food? No. What I just pretty much did, though, was I changed the amount of chemicals that my kids were exposed to. So I started making slowly. It was a process to figure out how to do this on my own and how I wanted to do it in a way that would work for my family and what was in what. I started reading ingredients, changing my dish soap, changing my detergent, changing the shampoo, you name it, lotions, creams, sunblock, taking all those things that had chemicals or harsh chemicals in them out of the diet. All right, so I'm going to pause my story here for a moment, and I'm going to show you, I have my garlic all cut up here. Now I actually don't need all this garlic, but I just went ahead and cut it up while I was telling you the story. And so let's go back to the recipe for a moment. Hopefully I've been keeping you entertained as I've been chopping here. And we have the garlic. We need to juice the lemon. And before we move over to the lemon, I just want to show you what I have here. I have my, most people would call these scraps. And I'm actually going to take them and put them in my baggie because I can use these to make a broth, which is also a recipe in my book, Rainbow Free Rocks. So I'm just going to slide that in there. And the reason I have it in a freezer bag is because I probably won't make the broth right now, but there's no reason why I can't save it for later. And I like to encourage people to try to use all the parts of everything that they have. So that is what I'm doing. All right, now we're going to go on to the lemon. So here's my lemon. So I'm just going to take a knife and chop it in half, or slice it in half, I should say. Ta-da! And then I like to save my seeds. I'm at a point right now with everything that's going on in the world of saving seeds. So I'll save my lemon seed here. And I'm going to take my juicer. I have a nice little handheld juicer. And I'm going to juice this half of the lemon. So where were we in the story while I'm juicing here? So I think I left off with my kids and how I started healing them. And so when I took out the eggs, Abigail got about 90% better. And I say 90% because that last 10% actually has to do with something totally different than food. I had her go to a school called Living Wisdom School, and she started doing yoga and meditation daily. And that, in my opinion, filled up the last 10% because she started making acquaintances with like-minded people and gaining a new sense of awareness with her body that was healing and healed. So now I have my lemon juice. I'm going to save that here for a moment, and I'm just going to look and see if there is anything else in my instructions for plan ahead. It looks like there is not, so we're good. So now I have once ready, and pretty much what we're going to do is blend all the ingredients in either a food processor or you can use a mini blender. I happen to use a Ninja blender, so I have this here. This is my little mini that goes along with it. And then you're going to scrape the sides as necessary, and that's pretty much it. It's not too involved. I do like to tell people, though, start with your oil if you're using this mini especially, because then it mixes a lot more easily. So I'll put the oil in first. We need a half a cup of extra virgin olive oil. So I have my measuring cup and my olive oil, pretty simple. I just noticed something. What was that? There. Okay. As I'm pouring this, let's see where else did I leave off in my story here for you. Just trying to remember. remembered yet. So we're going to go ahead and put the olive oil inside. I like to do a little tap, tap, tap to get the rest. I always try to teach my kids that too. My kids like to have fun in the kitchen with me. Cooking is a great way to spend time with your kids, other family members, teach little things like measurement. So when you make a recipe, there's so much more going on than just, oh, I'm making a pesto. And here you have a story that kind of coincides with this as well. So the next thing is I'm going to see if there are any other liquids. So I like to get my liquids in first. So I'm going to put my lemon juice in. Give you little sound effects. And you can see what I'm doing here. And then we need 1/2 cup of pine nuts. So I'm going to measure that out. And put that in. Again, tap, tap, tap. I'm going to be getting these on my floor, so hold on one moment. I'm going to discard those. Right, and then remember I'm skipping the kale, so we're going to be putting in 1 teaspoon of dried nettle. I have my teaspoon ready. And what I'll do is at the end I'll show you how to make the nettle salt. This way it doesn't get too confusing trying to do 2 recipes within 1 recipe. But for now we're getting the teaspoon of nettle. And this nettle is already cut and sifted. I'll leave that open. We're going to use that later. And then what do we have? So 2 garlic cloves is pretty much equivalent to 2 teaspoons of garlic. So that's a little hint for you. So I'm going to do 1, 2, and I don't happen to mind if they're heaping because I like garlic. If you don't like garlic that much, maybe you don't want the heaping ones. That's your choice. I'm going to kind of swish that around a little bit while I read here to see if I've missed anything else. We're going to do the salt, sea salt, and the black pepper. So 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. And so I'll try to reuse this teaspoon here. Actually put a little bit more than 1/2 teaspoon, but again, you can change things to meet how you like things. So for me, I don't mind a little extra salt, especially the Celtic sea salt. And I use Celtic sea salt because it's more genuine of salt, and I feel that it's better for one's health. That's my personal opinion. You can do your own research to see if you agree with that statement. And what else? We want some pepper, so 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. And again, because I like to cook in a way that kind of just eyes things based on what I want, I might go a little over. This time I didn't, but sometimes I do. And you're welcome to modify anything. I just want to say that over and over again, because when you're cooking, you're putting your energy into your food. You're putting so much into your food. Cooking isn't just like robotic, like I do this way. I mean, some recipes you have to be really precise, but many things actually you can tweak them and change them and modify them, and I want to give people the freedom to do that. So we have here some salt, pepper, lemon, nettle, olive oil, garlic. So last but not least, we're going to do our basil. And so I have here the 2 cups of tightly packed basil leaves. Ta-da! And I am going to shove them in. So it's not really rocket science at this point. Just going back to my story about my children, so you can tell that I healed my oldest daughter of autism spectrum disorder and ADHD by taking out the wheat, dairy, corn, soy, eggs, and gluten. We don't do peanuts because there is a severe peanut allergy in the household, so we just don't eat peanuts. So that's why my book is also peanut free. I happen to be fine with peanuts, so I personally could eat peanuts. I just haven't eaten peanuts for about 12 years. And I started actually getting sick when I was healing my kids. I really think when I look back that it was an energetic issue because I was under so much stress and I was up against a lot of opposition because what I was doing back 5 years ago was kind of just starting to become known. Like people were doing the paleo diet, people were vegans, but it wasn't like it is now. Now you see on labels for food items paleo vegan, or and even then I'm not a paleo vegan, but it was more difficult to find compliant food products. It's only been in like the last 3 years, I would say, maybe 4, so maybe like a year after I started my journey with healing my kids and myself, that I started seeing products along these lines. But still, the corn, and I'm going to emphasize this, the corn has always been the most difficult thing to get around. Corn is hidden in so many places, and because the United States of America likes to use corn so much, and no offense to anyone that loves their corn on the cob, I think if you're having organic corn on the cob and it's heirloom corn, you're probably fine. But what's been done to the corn and how it's in so many things, including like children's gummies and like little snacks and such, when it's time and time again in the diet, I feel like that's a really big issue. And it's not like the main thing that's causing a problem. I really feel like autism spectrum disorder and ADHD, for instance, is because of the chemicalization of the foods and other things, the water, the personal products people use, or toiletries, and it's just all around. And so I like to always tell people that I feel like, because a lot of people think that autism spectrum disorder, and people might disagree with me, they like to think that it is a genetic issue, and I would like to argue that it's the chemicalization of all the things we're interacting with, the food, the water, the air, that is changing the genes, and that maybe there is a possibility of certain genes being more susceptible than others. So that's the way I like to look at it, which might actually be the common thing now. I haven't researched this since I've been on this path of working on recipes and not having to focus on healing my kids as much as just upkeeping with what I'm doing. All right, so we're at the point where I'm going to be blending this. I've done a few shakes just to kind of mix it around. You can see I have everything here. So this part's going to be a little loud. I have to manually press the button, so please bear with me on this part. Show you what it looks like. With the ninja, I have to keep my finger on it. So I'm just going to take it off and give it a shake at this point. Shake, 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 shake. Kind of see how it's doing. Now, if I had had the kale, it wouldn't be quite as liquidy, but this is still okay, because what I'm going to do with this, well, a few different things. First of all, I love to add this to like a nice pasta, some like penne or whatnot. Goes really well with that, and then decorate it with some black olives, just like I have in one of my, I think it's a different picture in my book I can find for you later. And I also like to use it as a dip, where I can take my cassava flour tortilla wedges that are also in my book and dip it in and eat it that way, which is really nice and fun. Kids love like finger foods. And I also like to add this with quinoa and add things like broccoli and spinach and whatever I have on hand, some nice greens, or some peppers, some olives, almost like pizza, but I put it with quinoa and then decorate that up. That is really nice. You have some avocado slices on the side. So I'm just gonna do one more blend. I think this is pretty nicely blended. It's pretty hot too. Looking really really good. I wanted to mention though, so this recipe, like I talk about modifying, I have a cashew cheese, not really cheese, but you know, using cashews like cheese version, and it's the page before this. So this recipe is on page 15 of my book. Page 14 has the cashew cheese version. But for both of them, if you just want to swap out with the same amount of pumpkin seeds, I like sprouted pumpkin seeds, that is phenomenal also. So you have many different ways that you can make a pesto. So if you're out of one thing, you can use another. And I always like to bring that to people's attention. Just like I was out of the kale, but it was like, you know, it's okay, I don't need the kale, you know? That's the same thing I just want to bring about, is like sometimes we don't have something and we might be coming in a time where we need to be a little creative. So let's go over how to make some nettle salt before we end, because I do say in my recipe book that you could use nettle salt, and I talk about how it's on page 12. It's very simple. I'll show you. This is what the final product looks like, and it's kind of green. It has chunks of Celtic salt. So really all you're going to do, super easy peasy, is you're going to take the Celtic sea salt, whatever sea salt you're using, and the nettle, and you're going to do a 1-to-1 ratio, and you're going to need some kind of coffee grinder or spice grinder. So I have this one, and this is dedicated for just spices, even though it says it's a coffee grinder on the outside. So all I'm going to do is put my nettle in here, grind it up, and then whatever amount of nettle I have after I grind it up, I'm going to add the other ratio of salt. So pretty much so easy peasy, but I'll show you anyhow. You're just going to scoop up however much you want of the nettle. Oops, let's open that back up. And you might see in the background behind me, do you see those trays up above? That I'm actually sprouting microgreens. And so on my YouTube channel, I go over a bunch of different things. I go over how to make your own shampoos, your own dish soaps, your own I call it like an anti-scorpion spray, your own facial toner. And I also go over how to sprout microgreens, how to harvest them, how you can use them in a meal. I go over my garden, what my garden looks like, how I have the vision of making the garden, what I'm growing. And I offer a lot of different things. So I offer selling essential oils for making your own products. I'm a doTERRA essential oil representative. I offer Reiki, I offer consulting under Rainbow Healing and Wellness. And you know, time didn't permit for me to tell my personal story, but if you go on some of the shows I've been on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio, you can listen in on some of my personal experiences from my story. I'll be doing more videos on YouTube soon too, but I don't think I'll have quite enough time here today. And get my salt ready. I'm not going to put it in there. I'm just going to plug this in. It's going to be a little loud, just to warn you. I'm going to grind this up. I know it's already kind of cut, but I want it really fine. So I'm going to press the button at the top. So this is pretty much what it looks like. This one is a Mr. Coffee version, and I'll show it again in just a moment. Let me unplug it. So this is what it looks like, and then you can see when I open up, the powder is going to go poof out a little bit. See, woo, it's smoking out. Oh. And then I like to use a spoon to scoop it into my jar. And I got my jars at IKEA, in case anyone is wondering where to get these. I'm going to use this teaspoon to scoop it into here. All right, so while I'm scooping, I'll try to tell you a little bit of my story since we have a little bit more time here. Pretty much, I got to a point where I had pain in my ankles that made me have suddenly varicose veins, which made my ankles turn purple, which then went to my knees, which then went to my hips, which then made my right hip out of alignment and kind of twisted, which went up my spine, made my spine kind of off, made my right shoulder lifted, and caused me immense pain, including from my elbows to my wrists. And it happened pretty much all of a sudden. And then it just got worse and worse and worse. And during that time period, I was fatigued beyond belief. I was not able to get up and down stairs. I lived in a 3-story house. I was trying every single diet, you could think of that worked with my kids eating the new way that they were eating to be healthy and not in pain. But that didn't work for me. I tried the paleo diet, the Walls diet, the GAPS diet. I tried everything. But then, I started going to myself, maybe it's not any of those. Maybe I need to figure out what's going to work for just me. And I started taking a yoga class. It was a Raja yoga class. And it was through the worldwide organization called Ananda, Ananda. And they encouraged me when I was taking this course to not eat meat. That was the golden ticket for me. Because I was doing everything else and I was making my own detox smoothies, which the recipe is in my book. But when I cut out the meat, my body was able to heal itself. And that wasn't just the only thing though. I did start taking a lot of different supplements. I started first with calcium and magnesium and some omega-zen. I had made I call it a mistake because for me personally it was, I started taking the fish oil, the omega fish oils, and that was actually a mistake for me. That did not help me at all. It just increased my inflammation. So what I've gone and done is on my website, www.rainbowfoodrocks.com, I actually have a list of all the supplements that I personally take. And the reason I put it up there is not to say that I'm your medical doctor, because I am not a medical doctor, and you should always consult your medical doctor. But I put it up there because there might be someone else out there that has fibromyalgia, that has remitting multiple sclerosis, that has multiple sclerosis, that might have the Epstein-Barr virus or the reactivation of the Epstein-Barr virus, all of which I had the symptoms for. And if that's the case, many of those supplements could, when I say could, be helpful for you. So I have personal accounts of people that have tried doing what I'm doing and they have gotten themselves much better. Again, I'm not a medical doctor, so you do need to consult your medical doctor, but I encourage you to check out my website and check out all the materials, all the different videos I have put up there of all the different things to lead a holistic lifestyle to heal yourself. So, nettle salt, let's go back to that. I have the nettle, right? And then I have my Celtic salt. So now this is half full with nettles. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, right? And then I'm just gonna put half of my Celtic sea salt. Ooh, I'm making a mess a little bit. And then I'm gonna give it a nice shake, okay? I'm gonna find the cap for that. So you can see the half and half. Now this idea came from Ananda Farms, Camino Island. So I'm gonna give them a shout out. I went up to their farm to help them out when I was on my healing journey, and I was still not 100% well. And I learned that they put nettle salt on all their food, and I got curious. And so I figured out how to do it myself. I said, looks like a 1-to-1 ratio. Now, if you don't want to go through the trouble, you can go on their website and buy this. I personally think it's easy to make, but if you want to support their business, which I highly encourage, you can just buy it from them online. So there you have it. This is nettle salt. And if you feel like there's not enough salt, you're welcome to add more salt to it. And that is what I have for you today. So if you have any questions, this is going to be posted on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please leave your questions and comments below. Check out the description box. You'll see my link for ordering doTERRA essential oils. You'll see my website. You'll see an email if you want to email me and talk to me personally. You'll see probably some other things. You'll see my Facebook and Instagram. On Facebook, I'm Rainbow Food Rocks. On Instagram, I'm Kajal Kaja 378. So it's Kajal, Kajal dot Kaja, Kaja dot 378. That's for Instagram. And I'm trying to think if there are any other social medias I'm on. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, website. And again, just to go over my website, rainbowfoodrocks.com, is chock full of information. So please go check it out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, and share with like-minded people. Thank you.